This is CBC Vancouver News.
Breaking news, Canada's freight rail system grinds to a halt. Labour negotiations collapse, shutting down the country's two main railways. Plus,
the intention is always to keep the cuts as far away from the classroom as you possibly can.
I've been spending all summer trying to find a replacement for that, somehow get him to and from school.
Hundreds of Surrey students have been cut off from school bus services, including many with disabilities. We'll find out why. Also,
despite making progress on many fires, we are still in the core wildfire season.
Raining down relief. How the cooler, wetter weather is giving crews the upper hand in BC's wildfire fight. Hi, I'm Tanya Fletcher. Thanks for joining us. And we begin with breaking news. Both of Canada's major freight railroads have come to a full stop because of a contract dispute with workers. CN Rail and Canadian Pacific Kansas City say they are moving ahead to lock out nearly 10,000 engineers, conductors, and dispatchers. The deadline to reach a deal was tonight at 9 o'clock Pacific. But that deadline came and went, and moments later, with no agreement reached, this was the scene in Port Coquitlam. Pickets going up at CPKC's rail yard entrance, just as all freight rail traffic in Canada and all shipments crossing the U.S. grind to a halt. Now, combined, the two rail companies move more than $1 billion worth of goods per day across Canada, and businesses fear widespread implications if the trains don't resume running soon. The CBC's Anis Hidari has more on these latest developments and the ramifications.
We know that around 9,300 workers between both Canadian Pacific Kansas City and Canadian National are locked out at this point. The companies and the same union for both, the Teamsters, they've clearly been unable to come to a deal after a really long and fractious bargaining process. At some points, both sides couldn't even agree on what they disagreed about. The union said CPKC wanted to weaken rules protecting workers from fatigue, but the company said its offers didn't compromise safety. The Teamsters said CN wanted more power to order workers to relocate across Canada, but the company said that relocation would be voluntary. The federal government had rejected demands from both of the railways and from business groups to eliminate even the possibility of this labor dispute by forcing both sides into binding arbitration. But earlier today, the federal labor minister said absolutely not to that. Now, the Teamsters have said they remain at the bargaining table, but at the same time, all of their workers are locked out. In the short term, more than 30,000 commuters on certain lines in Vancouver, Toronto, and Montreal may not be able to grab their train of choice because some of those passenger trains operate on lines that need CPKC staff. Via Rail loses a route through Sudbury. Businesses are going to find shipping very seized up in the morning. Half of all Canadian exports take the train in some fashion. And it's pretty critical for goods at home, too. On top of consumer products like, let's say, foods, chlorine, which is needed for drinking water treatment, moves by rail, and it cannot move by truck or by ship.
That's the CBC's Anis Hidari reporting. For the latest on this developing story, head to cbc.ca/BC. In other news today, politicians of all stripes are condemning bomb threats allegedly made against roughly 100 Jewish institutions across Canada today. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau says the RCMP and local law enforcement agencies are investigating synagogues, Jewish community centres and hospitals in Toronto, Ottawa and Montreal all separately confirmed they had received a threat this morning. Police in Montreal checked a building in the west part of that city. And in Toronto, police searched buildings in the north part of the city. Ottawa police, meanwhile, were dispatched to several hospitals, and a spokesperson at one of them said the situation there was low risk. Now, here in Vancouver, police say one location, at least in this city, was also targeted, though officers didn't believe there was an immediate threat.
It's degrading and it is debilitating. And when you have to deal with this on a regular basis, whereas one week somebody sets fire to the front door of your synagogue, and the next week, a number of weeks later, they're receiving bomb threats. These are things that are meant to instill fear and trauma in a group of people.
Vancouver police say they are boosting patrols and working with the community leaders and the RCMP. Well, demolition is underway of the crane that collapsed in Vancouver's Dunbar neighborhood earlier this month.
It is a demo operation. We're demolishing the crane, not salvaging it.
This was the moment the crane came crashing down onto 41st Avenue after flames tore through a construction site. It led to weeks of neighborhood disruption as crews worked to clear the debris. The crane's segments are now being inspected before being removed for further investigation into what caused both the fire and the collapse. The city hopes to have the site cleaned up by Labor Day. Well, cooler, wetter weather has lowered the wildfire risk in parts of the province, and that's finally given fire crews the upper hand on some of the blazes that have been burning all summer long. But much of BC is still in the grips of severe drought. And as Michelle Gassoub reports, emergency officials warn the situation could still turn very dangerous very quickly.
I do want to be clear. Despite making progress on many fires, we are still in the core wildfire season, and we must remain vigilant and alert.
Provincial officials sending the message loud and clear. BC isn't out of the woods.
We're in a better place than we were last year, but last year was terrible, right? So we're in a better spot, but more than a quarter of the province is sitting at drought level 4, which is not great.
BC headed into the summer with a record low snowpack, but so far has avoided a worst-case scenario. While over 350 fires are burning, there are just 18 properties across BC under evacuation order and around 1,600 on alert. A relief from this time last year when fires raged through the Okanagan. But the impact on the landscape has been big.
BC has had almost double its average annual area burned this year so far. So in terms of community losses and evacuations, definitely been a quieter year for us here in BC, especially compared to last year. But in terms of fire activity, it's still been and still is a very active fire year.
Wilkinson says an isolated mixed weather pattern this summer kept fires from exploding out of control. Hot, dry periods were interspersed with storms across different regions of the province, and that helped keep fires small. But as of this week, the fire risk remains high in the north, with officials closely watching the Coria Creek wildfire.
On that fire, there is still some potential, I would say, in terms of increased wildfire activity, as we are seeing less precipitation and some more warmer and windier conditions.
Officials warning that as drought conditions persist and the risk of lightning remains, conditions can change with little warning. Michelle Gassoub, CBC News, Vancouver.
Some mixed results stemming from a deep dive into how Indigenous people are faring health-wise in BC. The research is monitoring First Nations people's health and wellness over the span of a decade from 2020 to 2030. A report released today finds that while infant mortality rates have dropped since 2021, the overall mortality rate has gone up.
The findings in this report are not just numbers. They represent individuals, families, and loved ones. These are people who are currently trying to live their lives despite challenges. And the data also points to people who have lost their lives due to COVID-19, due to the toxic drug crisis.
The life expectancy among Indigenous people is down as well, from 73 years old now to 67 years. The head of the BC Assembly of First Nations says the overall Canadian life expectancy is 15 years higher than that. And it's a gap that highlights just how all levels of government, he says, fail to prioritize healthcare in First Nations communities.
Lack of doctors, nurses in remote communities, and accessing mental health and addictions resources to deal with the opioid crisis is really hindering the life expectancy of many First Nations across British Columbia.
In part, the study recommends improving access to culturally sensitive healthcare. Let's take you to Surrey now, where more than 500 families have been told their children won't have access to school bus services. That includes hundreds of students with disabilities who have support needs. As Mira Baines tells us, the school district blames it on a funding shortfall and says cutting transportation was necessary to protect needs inside the classroom.
It's really, really hard, and I can't do it with my job, and I can't change jobs anymore.
Nicole Berg is facing an uphill battle after a cut to school bus services for children with special needs, including her son Marcus, who is going into grade 11 at Lord Tweedsmuir. It's a struggle to find a solution as both parents are working.
To find an able-bodied person who can pick up my son, who is partially verbal, who can't communicate with a phone accurately, to a school that is overcrowded and now has extended days. There's constant traffic.
She and hundreds of other parents say they received letters denying access to transportation services for the upcoming school year because of a $3.5 million funding cut. They're going public by issuing a news release to call attention to the issue just 2 weeks before the school year starts. Parents are trying to work out a plan with their school principal so their children who are vulnerable can stay safe after school.
He's safer to be there unsupervised on school grounds than he is to be trying to walk home.
Overall, parents say busing for students with disabilities and support needs has been reduced by half. The Surrey School Board confirms there is a budget shortfall and transportation is not funded by the Ministry of Education, but the board has been providing the service until now.
The intention is always to keep the cuts as far away from the classroom as you possibly can.
This Surrey School Board trustee says while the ministry provides overall funding for education, it doesn't account for inflation, which boosts costs and population growth.
We've made our pitch to ministry about all of these increased costs that we can no longer sustain because of the massive increase in student population we get every year.
The ministry responded with a statement from Education Minister Rachna Singh, who is also a Surrey MLA. We understand families of children with complex needs face unique challenges, and we regularly meet with provincial advocacy and stakeholder organizations to discuss equity and accessibility in education, said the minister. She does not specifically address a solution for the families who are struggling with these cuts. The minister's response is cold comfort for those who are trying to work out a plan for their children in September. Mira Baines, CBC News, Surrey.
And still in Surrey, the clock is ticking on a drop-in service for people experiencing homelessness. Funding for the Cove Healthy Living Complex of Care is set to run out in 2 weeks. Our Caroline Chan stopped by the centre to look into the ramifications of such a shutdown.
Right now, we are inside the Cove Healthy Living Unit, which we fondly call CHILL.
Oh, I like that name now. Yeah. What kind of services do you offer here at CHILL?
Well, the services here range anywhere from being able to do your laundry if you're on the street, public washrooms. We have 2 public washrooms. We have 2 showers that you can go inside, lock the door, and have a nice shower. We have both warming in the winter and cooling stations in the summer when we get the extreme weather. My name is Jack O'Halloran, and I am the CEO of Surrey Urban Missions. We got a one-time grant from UBCM through the city, and we knew it was a one-time grant, but I don't think anybody expected us to serve over 40,000 people in that 1 year that we were open. We run almost 24 hours a day, every day of the week.
But we're coming kind of to the end, right? There's a date.
It was early May that we figured we were out of money, but we found some extra. And then I got a little reprieve. I had an extra grant given to us from BC Housing, and they said I could keep it to keep this place running longer. But as of September 2nd, we will run out of funds to be able to safely operate.
It's just a policy that people need to have a place to get clean. I mean, they can go to community centers, but if you don't have the money to go to community centers, right? So I'm saying I think it's a good thing that they have to have places that people can get clean, and their laundry. You know, they'll be out there all dirty, and this place cleans people. They help them, and it gives them dignity. Right? They can go out and say, hey, I'm clean today. And there's a lot of people who need to change, make a choice in life. And they say, wait, hey, I'm changing and I'm looking clean. I have a place to look clean, and I can go to this college course or, get some courses and get off the streets and work my way up. you know, and this is a stepping stone, right, for them. I'm just saying. So I just hope the government realizes that some of these type of places are needed.
My name is Mackenzie. I'm a caseworker or a community connection worker at the Cove Healthy Living here. This is the only place they can go for the absolute, like, bare necessity resources. And without them, like, ultimately it's harm reduction. Without showering, using the bathroom, having clean clothing, people's health are at risk, and this is the only place that they can get it. So there's absolutely a major impact if we were to lose this place. And not only that, we have more clients than what we can handle. We have like hours of people waiting just to get into one of our bathrooms, let alone if we didn't have one. So it's really important for the community, and that's what I most directly see when I see clients come in here and the impact that this place has.
Not everybody wants to stay in a shelter, and in all honesty, we don't have near enough shelter beds. There's still over 1,000 people on the street, just in the Wally area. So we don't have that many beds. So to be able to have this kind of service, where even you could just go and get some respite from the day, is a huge factor. You know, you just come in for a coffee and a bagel or a sandwich and talk to somebody, you know, without being seen in a different, strange light.
What needs to happen between now and September 2nd?
Well, we have to find, you know, whether it's a private donator, whether it's a church. We actually had a phone call from a church asking how much it is to run monthly, and could they contribute for a month or two. I mean, it costs about $60,000 to run this thing every month. And I mean, if we get 60 in, I'll keep it open for another month and another month and another month. We've gone to the city, and the city's done the best it can. They don't have the funding this year. The province, BC Housing, doesn't have the funding. So we're looking for anything, and as long as I've got a day left on the calendar, I'm going to hope that something shows up.
So September 2nd, if it passes, what happens to this space then?
We'll clean it out. We'll empty it all out and clean it. I believe the city of Surrey leases these units, so I understand this will all be taken away, and it'll be a vacant lot.
To go from serving the community in such a big way to like a vacant lot just seems like a real, it hurts.
It does, and knowing the people, you know, different from even an investor or the city, but knowing the faces of the people that come here. And until September 2nd, we are going to hope that somehow, some way, you know, we get blessed with the ability to keep this open, because it is a much needed facility.
By the way, if you have an issue you'd like to ask the Premier about, tune into BC Today starting tomorrow at noon. Premier David Eby will take your calls and emails. It'll be on CBC Radio 1, CBC Gem, and our CBC Vancouver YouTube page. Up next, renewed calls for the feds to bring back a lifeguard program to Canada's hottest surf spot. That story after the break. Welcome back. Let's take you to the Kootenays, and police are telling people in Kimberley to check their tires following more reports of someone purposely loosening lug nuts.
I already started slowing down. I got to about probably 70, and then the back driver's side tire just came right off the truck and went whizzing down the highway.
Well, thankfully, no one was hurt, but there have been 10 reports of loosened lug nuts so far. RCMP are urging drivers to report anything suspicious. Well, to the island, and if you've been to Tofino, you know just how busy the summers can get there. And for good reason. The tourist hotspot is famous for its sandy, surfable beaches. But something you won't see: lifeguards stationed along the waterfront. Despite 1 million tourists visiting each year, anyone who braves the ocean water does so at their own risk. 2 surfers died in Tofino last year, and a near drowning this summer has renewed calls for the federal government to reinstate a lifeguard program that was canceled in 2012. You're looking at a live shot of the Port of Vancouver. Well, cooler conditions persist this week, but how much rain will it mean? We'll find out with the 5-day forecast next.
The weather update is brought to you by Direct Buy Furnace. To cool and clean the air in your home, call Direct Buy Furnace. Installing Trane, the most reliable heating and cooling brand.
Well, let's bring in our Darius Madavi for a look at the forecast. And Darius, if you didn't know it by looking outside, surely the fair at the Peony is here because just like clockwork, the weather has changed.
Yes. The solution has been staring us right in the face, Tanya. The solution to drought, just have the Peony earlier in the year and then have it open every weekend, and then we'll get lots of rain. That's what's happening right now. Tons of rain coming into the province, especially on the south coast, but also if we zoom out to the rest of the province, plenty for parts of the interior as well. Now, we do have a few warnings in place to mention. Of course, for the east coast of the island, where we were looking at those rainfall advisories, 30 to 50 millimeters. That does seem to have panned out. Down here, we also have a waterspout advisory, as well as on more inland sections in the strait as well. So possibility of some waterspouts popping up tonight as well. So a lot of excitement really across the province that we were looking at earlier. Now, in terms of what's happening at sort of a broad scale before we get into the nitty-gritty, we have this low pressure system over here off the coast of BC that's going to finally start to work its way over parts of the province, spreading a little bit more precipitation to the south. And then towards the end of this, you can just see this low starting to come in, this trough. That should bring some more precipitation to the north coast and up in the northwest as well, and potentially even other parts of the north, the northeast. So we'll take a look at that in a second. But first, for now, for just the next few days until Friday, we do have a little bit more precipitation leaking into parts of the island, but then a little bit more for the southern interior as well throughout Friday. Now, if we roll this a little bit further forward, now we can see all of that happening. And then if we switch to the more coarse grain model, because it's a bit further out, we also have some decent precipitation coming into parts of the north late this weekend. So a little bit of good news there. In terms of temperatures, those are also starting to come up a little bit in the southern interior over the next few days, but then are expected to drop again as we get into the weekend. So a brief spike in temperatures, but then a reprieve comes back for the wildland in terms of the fire situation. And in terms of conditions across the province, lots of sunshine tomorrow, fairly low risk of thunderstorm activity really across BC, which is a little bit of good news. Plenty of sunshine across the board. Here in Vancouver, though, mainly cloudy skies tomorrow, a little bit of rain, possibility of a thunderstorm overnight Friday into Saturday, where we're seeing some very rainy conditions, so be prepared for that. And if you have a camping trip planned this weekend in the Alpine or in the backcountry nearby, be prepared.
Okay, well, not a total washout, but I guess we can expect end of August, this kind of thing. Thanks so much, Darius.
Thank you.
And that is your late news for this Wednesday, August 21st. For news anytime, anywhere, download the free CBC News app. You can always find us online as well. We're at cbc.ca/BC. Thank you so much for watching. Have a great night.